Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Chess Olympiad. Welcome back to more chess drama. This is the 9th round out of 11. And going into this round, India is absolutely all guns blazing, full steam ahead, undefeated, and they're playing Uzbekistan. At the last Olympiad, Uzbekistan actually defeated India, and Nodirbek Abdusatorov defeated Gukesh. So it's a rematch of the previous Olympiad. And it's a very, very exciting time. Also, the women's Olympiad is a very, very close race. I'm going to recap all of that. But we had more chess drama today. You see, the captain, the coach/captain of the Uzbekistan national team is none other than Grandmaster Vladimir Kramnik, who I've had the, I would say pleasure of meeting, but, and interviewing him. And over the last few months, he's been a fascinating and controversial individual in the world of chess. He's coaching the Indian team, and before this round, he filed a formal complaint against the fact that the Chess Space India channel, the biggest and most reputable and very beloved journalistic channel, which has promoted so much different chess in India, that they are recording the games, live streaming them on mobile phones. He said it's against FIDE rules to have mobile phones in the playing hall. Now, if you just listen to that and you go, what? They have phones at the board? That's insane. Then you're dumb and you're not listening to any of the other details. All of the phones have no SIM cards. They have no telecom capabilities. They do not broadcast. They're on airplane mode or whatever the equivalent is. All they do is stare at the board. That is, it's just a camera. That's all they do. It's been happening for the entire tournament. He only has a problem with it now that it's against Uzbekistan. He said he would do it against any other team. No, he wouldn't. That's not true. He only did it when they played their team. And also, the team captain gets to sit and watch the game. I mean, you could even argue that there shouldn't be a spectator. There should be no spectators, right? Also, not to mention, everybody is scanned head to toe. Now, should cameras be there instead of smartphones? Yes, maybe, but they cost thousands of dollars, potentially more. And even cameras now, it's 2024, can transmit information. All signs point to the fact that the most reputable chess journalist from India, Sagar Shah, Amruta, and all of their team is in no way, shape, or form wrong. And on top of that, definitely got permission from FIDE to do this and show them that there's no way these phones could be doing anything. Now, again, there are people who are saying you could give the phone could give haptic information. The games are broadcasted on a delay. There are 100 cameras around. Don't you think that if a player walked up to a phone or very clearly was receiving information from one of those phones that it would be obvious? I mean, I just can't. But listen, I got to give credit to Kramnik. Number one, his whole reputation and history aside, he's defending the people that he's supposed to be working with. God bless him. Number two, he's just finding a way to stay in the storylines. Like, here I am talking about him, right? I mean, you got to give the guy credit. Him and Hans Niemann keep finding a way to make it into these videos because they're on fire, man. They really are. And for a little while, the board one phone on the Gukesh board was confiscated. It wasn't there anymore. They put it through fair play checks. Right. Anyway. Let's analyze some chess. India versus Uzbekistan is the first match we will cover because that is the hottest match. Then I'm going to show you Magnus Carlsen. I know you love Magnus Carlsen. You love him. All right. Even if Norway is not playing for a gold medal, they can play for silver. They are obviously a very, very strong team. Okay. Here we go. India, Uzbekistan. Now, by the way, the Gukesh and Nodirbek game, pretty uneventful draw. They both played quite well. It was an interesting game. The excitement happened on the other boards. The excitement happened on board 2. And board 3, Eric Icey, an absolute monster in this tournament. Yeah. So let's cover these games. So Javakhir Sindarov opens up with e4. We have e6. And by the way, all of this is on social media. You can go follow it. Kramnik did an interview. I mean, I just think the whole thing is, if you boil it down to the fact that phones should not be in the playing hall, that you're not listening to any of that. So they have gone through so many scans, red tape, bureaucracy. I can't even, anyway. D5, E5, C5. We have an advanced French. Prague plays for a win. I mean, you don't really play the advanced French. You don't play the French if you're trying to draw nowadays. We have C3, Knight C6. And Sindarov plays a3 and b4. This is a system where black allows white to take a little bit of space, but tries to play on the queen side. Bishop e3, knight h6. And from the early opening, it was Sindarov who was playing very, very solidly, giving up the dark-scored bishop here, and pushing back this knight with the move b5. Bishop takes a3, by the way, free pawn. You cannot take it. If you take it, rook c1 comes in, and rook h1. So castles, bishop e7. And Sindarov playing on all three sides of the board, locking the center, defending his pawn, and advancing over here. This is a very engine-like approach. Okay, that's a very dangerous thing to say, considering everything that I just said, but it is. It's not from the mobile phone. The mobile phone is not... I'm just saying, like, the way he's playing here, very computer-like. I mean, it's very beautiful, actually, in the modern day. A lot of the black pieces can't really move too well. And by the way, you know, rook c3 is chosen. g5 pushes these pieces back. Look at Sindarov's time spent, by the way. Look at Sindarov. He hasn't spent any time. How wicked is that? Sindarov has not spent any time. He's playing this whole thing he had well prepared. 19 moves of prep. 19 moves! He prepares half of the allotted time control, prog things for a little while, and at some point when you're under this form of pressure, you make a mistake. And you see Sindarov moving all his pieces that way, putting the king on h1 because he's going to move the knight there, he's going to move the rook there, and finally, Prog makes a mistake. And he's in deep trouble. Sindarov now can play h5. And even though he is down a pawn, it's very tough to defend yourself here with like, you're going h6, right? Now here you think, how's white going to break through? Queen d2 ideas, e4, queen f4, a lot of pressure here. But the position sort of is dead now, and you can play forever. Not the easiest thing to do, though, and instead Sindarov plays knight f6. Now, if you take the knight, you die. You cannot take this knight. Actually, both captures look okay, but only this one is good, because this opens up the g file with attacking ideas, like here, mate, also getting around, also queen h6, knight g5. But if Prog doesn't take and he just backs up, this is a very, very ugly position. But Prog defends it very handsomely. Knight g4 is a nice idea, but there is just nothing you can do. It's actually kind of insane. You can pull up on your opponent like this, and as long as the opponent doesn't want to lose and is not paid to lose to you, he won't. He'll just play like, he'll just move. And Sindarov tries his best, but unable to break through. And he doesn't sacrifice any more material, and they make a draw. Now, he had a nice position there for a moment, right? The advantage was quite big in white's favor, but the attack was a little bit mysterious of how to break through. Maybe you had to play, you know, for a break. Instead, he does it the wrong way. The game ends in a draw. Now, this game was nuts. This is Erigaisi Vokhidov. Now, I like Vokhidov because he played for the Gotham Knights in the Pro Chess League before they discontinued the Pro Chess League because, you know, they were worried we were going to win every season. We were a monster team. Some of you still have the hoodie. That hoodie is now limited edition because we won't have another one. Now, this game was crazy. It was a Berlin, castles 94 d4. And speaking of Kramnik, you know, this is Kramnik's bread and butter. I mean, he basically invented the modern Berlin defense. Erigaisi plays a move I've never seen in my life, which is bishop to a4. So he plays into the Berlin, but then he doesn't take the knight. Black plays e4, which is not the best move. And from the opening, it's actually Erigaisi who's putting some pressure. We have knight e5, d5, d6, and from the early going, it was Erigaisi. He had a slightly better position, he had slightly more active pieces, and if black rushes to trade, he can't get this bishop out. And he's worse, and you will, you know, improve your position, etc. So now Erigaisi has the best chance of anybody. I mean, you can argue that for a moment, Sindarov there was looking quite nice. You know, that's, yeah. Rook d8, g4. Look at this. He starts an attack. Rook d4. All his pieces are nice. But just like Prog was defending his position, you know, Vokhidov is trying to defend his position. Rook d7, knight e4. Queen g6 is the wrong move. Apparently, coming back and going for g5 is the way to go. So both guys missing an opportunity. c5, very nice counter shot. You can't take the queen. The bishop is spinning. Knight c5, and now bishop takes g4. And we are probably heading for an endgame, which is going to be a 3-on-2 versus a 2-on-3 on each side. Bishop versus knight. All signs do point to the bishop being slightly better than the knight. All signs point to it until this very moment, where all of a sudden, my man, Shamsidin Vokhidov, blunders the game away in one move. Literally one move. The knight no longer defends the pawn. It guards the rook. The winning move here is simply to take on f7. Why is that the winning move? Because when queen f7 happens, you move the queen away, and the rook pins the queen to the king. Bishop f7, queen f7, you move away. But you have to move away to the right spot, because when black blocks, queen d8, there's no way for black to block without losing material. If queen e8, queen c7, if knight e8, you take the queen. Argentina guys, he can take that pawn f7. This is the biggest moment in the entire match. And he misses it. A huge moment. And now we are going to the endgame. And the thing is, both guys saw the draws already. This is the last game of the round. All right? And now it's not clear who's playing to win, who's playing to lose. I mean, white has pawn weaknesses. White has a worse pawn structure. So he might lose one of those pawns. Okay, he's not going to lose one of those pawns. Now, Vokhidov is maybe going to work. The knight is powerful. The knight is very strong. White has all the pawns on the wrong color. And he's putting a lot of pressure here. And listen, this is very bad. Erigaisi's king has been pushed all the way to the back. We are now into, the 70th move, but probably it's going to go to a draw. Oh, but c5 played, and he offers a draw, and it's accepted. Because after take rook c5, king b6 looks nice, but by the way, even this is just a pretty easy draw. You just keep the king exactly where it is, put the bishop far away, you'll give up the bishop for the final pawn. And a very tense match ends in a draw. Kramnik gave an interview after. He said he said he was happy with his team's performance, but he thought that they could win the match. And I was like, I don't know how he got to that conclusion, but Kramnik always thinks he can win everything, including every conversation about fair play. But that's kind of crazy. I think if any team was close to winning the match, I would say it was India. Because bishop f7 was on the board, and then you had to move the queen to the right infiltration spot. And he's going to be... Listen, Erigaisi has had a monster event. Before this, he was 7.5 out of 8. But that hurts. There's no way around that as a chess player. And he was in form, and, he had it, but... It ends in a draw. Now, of course, they're looking at the other boards. They're looking at the other teams that could potentially catch them. It's close out here, But one of those matches is right here. Iran-China. And it came down to this game. The other games were drawn. The winner of this game gets close and ties Uzbekistan for second place. E4, C5. There's going to be a winner. I've never seen this in my life. Bishop C4. Bishop c4 is what he goes for, not knight c3. I have never seen this move. You look at the opening database, it is probably unbelievably rare. The point is that if you take on e4, you got weak stuff over here. So for example, bishop f7, king f7, there is like queen h5, queen d5. It's very odd and complicated, and black has to be precise. Well, Wei Yi doesn't go for any of that. He just plays e6, and then he plays g6. By the way, bishop c4, bishop d3 is apparently the meta choice. He goes g6. He gets Tabatabai somewhat out of his preparation, who then plays c4, knight c3, and now has to spend some time. Right, so Wei Yi trying to blow up the center here with d5. We get e5. Takes, knight d5. f4, okay, very aggressive move. And from the beginning of the game, I mean, it looked like white had a very pleasant position, but Wei Yi's got some various flank attacking ideas. He can target the position over there. Knight e4 followed by king h1 and trying to put the knight on d6, or this side of the board is quite nice, and fighting for the dark squares. Queen e2 gives away a little bit of the advantage, but not because of f6. f6 just keeps the game very tense and complicated. Takes. I mean, black's got a bad structure. c6, e6, not so great, but he has a lot of dynamics working in his favor. And bishop e3, queen d8, Tabatabai from the early opening could have gone knight to e4, trying to get to c5, and he would have been in great shape. He might have not liked giving up the dark squared bishop, but the position is fantastic. Your next moves are knight g5, rook a d1, pawn is always going to b3. White has absolutely zero weaknesses and all the targets in the world. I actually don't exactly know what he didn't like about knight to e4. Instead, he goes this way, and again, white is better. But both guys were kind of misunderstanding what was to happen here. Knight c5, obviously, there's rook b2, but bishop c5 is possible. Okay, rook d1 is played, queen c7. And now, again, you got to go forward with something. I mean, even b3, just getting the pawn out of the way. But he goes here, and on the very next move, maybe the tension of the game gets to him. He keeps trying to subtly maneuver, and black just continues to defend himself. Bishop c2, rook h5, trying to counterattack white, and by this point, Now Wei Yi takes over the game. He outmaneuvers Tabatabai. You can also tell Tabatabai got down to 10 minutes. It was definitely the tension. There was an element here of tension. You know, like knight e4 and rook d1 and b3 is pretty natural for a guy that's, 27, 15. He's very, very strong. But I feel like there was a degree of like uncertainty. He was thinking a lot. He was trying to, even here, bishop c5, for example, there is rook takes f4, which of course is nice. Rook f4 and queen f4, it looks like you're winning a pawn. But even something quite simple like bishop a7, getting a permanent outside past a pawn, like for the rest of the endgame, that's going to be there. This is better for white. Like white is happy here. Black's bishop is quite bad, can't really make a lot of forward moves. But he kept trying to find the subtle maneuver, and finally, Wei Yi takes over. Except on this move, he plays bishop b5, but okay, fine. Bishop c2, and now g5, and this is bad news. White's got 3 minutes on the clock. Wei Yi smells the blood. He senses that something is a bit off with his opponent, so he plays g5. Yeah, again, bishop g1. You can try to play, but bishop g1, a lot of retreating, and finally, Tabatabai plays knight c5, and in comes the black knight. Somehow, black played around the terrible pawns. He got the bishop out the other way. He let the knight survive. And this is bad news, because if you take with the bishop, there is just simply mate. If you don't take the knight with anything, then you're in trouble anyway. So we have rook e3, fe3, and now Wei Yi. This is the cleanup phase. Gets all the pieces nice and active. He doesn't even care about the pawns anymore because he's up a rook. And rook d5 is a very nice final touch. Why rook d5? Queen is hanging. You can't really take, you can't take anything. Queen c1, and we trade. Bishop goes to e3 to trade again. This is just the winning endgame. Wei Yi, very nice. Queen g5, rook c5, queen f5. King is safe. There's going to be no more checks pretty soon. And this is over. And in this position, Tabatabai resigned. Wei Yi gets the win for China. By the way, Ding Liren was completely winning on board one. Completely winning against Parham. I will show you that game very briefly. That was a crazy position. Ding was totally winning. Here it was +5. +5. Ding hasn't won a classical game in a while. In the last, 250 days, he has 17 draws and 8 losses in classical chess. He played a fantastic game. It was vintage Ding. It was a double fianchetto, very, slow maneuvering positional game. He made improvements. He played beautifully. He expanded on the queen side. 2-on-1, 1-on-0, expanding, perfect play. And then he goes here and allows the king to get closer. And he misses rook d7, and now the game is a draw. Right here, if Ding had just played king f3, just a little bit of patience, king c6 no longer does anything, because you just go rook b1, you wait, bishop f4, and then you can just expand into the position. You can play h5, you can slowly, but he goes for it with rook a5, and ultimately it is Parham who is holding in this endgame. Now, it still got a little bit exciting, but ultimately it was a draw. But fortunately, Wei Yi held it down. This is just a draw. h8, right? You lose both pawns. So China wins, and China, Uzbekistan, and one more team are in second place. By the way, crazy stuff was happening on the other side. So it's very close to the Women's Olympiad. You got Kazakhstan, Poland. You got India versus the United States. You got other teams like Ukraine is up there. The top board for the U.S., Begim Tokhirjonova, defeated Vaishali Ramesh Babu. She defeated the grandmaster of the Ramesh Babu family. There's two of them, right? Prague also. And this was a very, very big matchup as well. So this one begins with a Queen's Gambit declined. It's Bishop b4, the Rogozin, Queen a4, and a main line, which turns into whatever on earth this is, where Black is putting some pressure on the pawn on c4. White is going for the 2-bishop position. Look at Black, Vantika trying to attack. Bishop to d3. I mean, it's clear that every player on the Indian national team, whatever color they are all playing for a win. Bishop b2. e4. That is a crazy move. To play this move, pushing back this bishop, but Vantika is very brave here. Knight c6. Keep in mind, as this game is going on, you're looking at your teammate, you're going, oh my god, my teammate is losing. What do? I know what the best move is, but do I play for a win, right? If I play for a win, I might take some risk. Bishop A1, and I mean, Crush is a very experienced player, biding her time. Queen on B2, very tense. Vantika still sharp, 5 minutes on the clock, and knight F1. The slow transfer of the knight to this side of the board is wrong. Instead, actually, B4 was required, and playing on this diagonal, trying to utilize the queen and the light squared bishop. Instead of that, we have knight F1, and suddenly Vantika Agrawal is playing for a win. This is unbelievable. The bishop in on D3, and now you're also protecting against mate, so you can move your knights. Bishop C2, takes. Here comes Vantika, H5, knight E2, H4, she is completely winning. Here, knight goes back to C1 to trade. Now, if Vantika plays knight to F4, she wins the game. If she leaves the position, knight F4 is game over, it's mate. Pawn takes knight F4. The only way to stop mate is F3. The winning move here, rook D1, pawn takes F3. The game is over. Rook E2 is incoming. Knight H3, FG, the game is over. Everything, knight E2 is incoming. Everything is going to happen. But instead of that, she plays knight C1, the advantage is gone. She took the knight. Oh my god. She had a minute. She goes down. One of the knights going to F4, threatening the mate, threatening all that, is completely winning. She blows it. Queen C1, but she still has F4. And here, Irina Krush, with 125 on the clock, has to step out of the attack. It's not easy to do. It's not easy to do. But the idea here would have been FE3, probably Queen G3, probably Rook F8, but this is okay. And this position is still holdable, even though it looks very, very dangerous. Instead, with a minute on her, she spends a minute of her time, and she takes the pawn. She only calculated E3. She goes for F5 counterattack. But black does not have to take. Black goes queen G5. The threat is pawn takes F2. There is E2 sometimes. Knight F4 is a massive problem. And all of a sudden, Vantika Agrawal takes the pawn on F2. She plays queen G3 check. And rook to E2. You cannot stop mate. And she saves the match for India. They had the back to the wall there after knight takes C1. They would have lost 2 points to the United States of America. But they get 1 point out of the match. And they stay in contention for a gold medal. Now this board was crazy. That match was a tie. This match, there was a winner. E4. This is Poland versus Kazakhstan. I feel like this is like the only sport we get that matchup for like an Olympic gold. In what other sport can Poland and Kazakhstan compete? Like some sort of skiing? I don't even know. Knight C3. Naidorf Sicilian, Alua Nurman. By the way, multiple people in this video, including Fedoseev, who I'm going to show you against Magnus. We haven't even covered Magnus. Can you believe it? Probably sitting there like, what? Where's Magnus? Well, we're going to cover him. I promise. Yeah. Multiple people on the Gotham Knight. Shamsiddin Vokhidov, knight B3. She plays H5. This is a very prophylactic move, looking to stop things over here. Knight BD7. The knight goes to D5. What you normally do here is you take, so white has a pawn there. Castles. Queen C7. Very, very sharp position. You offer a queen trade, though, and it's going to get a little bit less sharp. But white's like, nope. No queen trade. I don't want to go king B1. We're going to attack over there. Bishop B7. H4. B5. I mean, both sides here trying to expand exactly where they need. G4 here is the way to go. It's an incredibly complicated position, but G4 is likely the way to go here. Black can actually sacrifice a full knight, which is insane. And after queen B7, it's not easy to defend yourself. You've got to be quite careful here. But, or king B1, and then probably G4. Plays bishop E2. It's a very logical decision. But the problem is you leave your king here. And there are some ways now to attack. First of all, there's knight B6. Second of all, somebody's got to protect this pawn. And it's not easy to do that, right? With your king stuck in the center. For example, if king B1 and queen B7, you can play C4 here. Right? This is one of the key ideas. But with the king on C1, you're not going to do that because the king is pinned. So from the early game, it was black outplaying her opponent. It was Alua Nurman. Knight takes D5, fantastic move. Right? Rook D5, you're just taking back. So knight takes E7, and now the king comes out to play. And sometimes in these Sicilians, the king participates, and after that, it is bad news. The knight goes back to F6 to cover some squares. Rook D8 would have probably been better to go somewhere else, maybe with the queen first. It doesn't matter, though. Alua makes a couple of improving moves. She safeguards her position. White continues the counterattack, and now it's time to win. But suddenly, queen C7, and Alicia is back in the game. Alicia, I don't know. Bishop c2, a5. Still trying to attack. Here comes g5. Here comes f4. Look at this position. This is insanity. g5 and f4. White's got her attack going. ef4, rook f3. And now Alua plays d5. And she's losing. d5 is a losing move. Queen d4 check followed by bishop d3. Queen d4, bishop d3. There is no rook c4. Queen d4, bishop d3. That is the way White wins this position. But she goes here. Black only has 4 minutes on the clock. Rook c4. But now the bishop is trying to kick you out. But now rook e... Oh my god, what is that? Bishop e4, pawn takes. Now the queen is going to hit over here. Queen c1. She brings the rook back to e7. Rook f4. Alua has 2:52 on the clock versus 16 minutes. Bishop back to c2. Rook d7. Very tense game. Maybe we're going to repeat. Maybe not. Queen d3. a3. Slight improvements. Alua has 48 seconds on the clock, but we make it to the next time control. King a2. Rook e4. Very tense. We trade the rooks. Black is playing with no knight. Alua is literally playing the game without a horse. Rook d4. But now here comes the horse. And suddenly White's like, oh my god, she panics. Here comes the horse completely. And White panics again. And suddenly Alua's got a totally winning position. And her attack lands. b4. We trade, by the way, it's unbelievable. AB is the wrong move. Queen e3 here is better. It's not a fork because of queen d1, but it's better to include. Doesn't matter. This ultimately is the fatal mistake. In comes the knight. And lo and behold, Alua Nurman, member of the Gotham Knights championship team, slowly converts the advantage. It was a very tense battle. But ultimately, we go to the endgame. This is just winning. And it takes a little bit more time. The pawns start moving. The rooks start moving. The final pawn will fall. There it is. And on the 86th move of the game, White resigned, and Kazakhstan leads the Women's Olympiad with 2 rounds to go because of the only decisive result in this match. Folks, the final game of today's recap, Magnus Carlsen versus Vladimir Fedoseev, who represents Slovenia. Hungary, by the way, was defeated by Team USA on the open side. This one, we saved Magnus for last. Can you believe it? d4, d5, knight f3, c5. A very aggressive line chosen by Fedoseev. Magnus plays c4. A mirror image Queen's Gambit. cd. cd. Knight f6. Knight d4 and knight d5. Now, this line, the mirror image Queen's Gambit, this was played by Hikaru. Hikaru has played this multiple times, so I actually have a feeling Magnus looked at this. He looked at this... And White has a small advantage here with bishop b5, knight c3 ideas. Magnus, might have been playing a little bit slowly, remembering everything and remembering all of the details. Fedoseev was playing quite quickly. Look at the time advantage. But he did say after the game, he was like, I think Magnus was actually maybe tricking me a little bit. For example, bishop f2, allowing the capture on f5 and all of this. And it's funny because they had such a, deep meta strategy here. This was the middle game that they sort of found themselves in. 6 pawns each. White has a slight advantage because of the control over the position, the light squares. The king is actually closer to the action in the center. But Magnus was just a little bit slow in the game. He played rook d1, and Fedoseev just kind of kept up a faster pace. And Fedoseev apparently analyzed this even this deep, which is nuts. He had this endgame plan from a distance. Rook h5, rook f5 is an idea. Here Magnus does something absolutely bananas. He starts walking his king. He walks the king to the center. This is maybe literally the exact reason this is better for White. This exact position, which is nuts. It's so crazy. By the way, knight e7 looks like it wins a pawn. It does win the f pawn, but then you lose. Then you get brutalized by all the pieces. So kind of a ridiculous position, but I mean, okay, Magnus has exactly, his opponent exactly where he wants him. Rook g5 is chosen here. And now there are some very exciting lines like g4. Okay. hg. For example, bishop to e3, rook h5. Here, rook h2, rook d2. And you kind of play this endgame. Maybe Magnus thought there's not enough here. So instead of moving his g-pawn, he plays rook g1. I wonder, for a guy like Magnus, that is such a counterintuitive move. Because you feel like your rook is so powerful, but I think the point here is you're relying on this, right? You're relying on the weakness of the pawn, but here comes g6. And suddenly, the game is super sharp. Look at Magnus's king run to e6, but he doesn't have that much time. Bishop c5, and here's something completely nuts happens. Instead of running deeper into the territory, which actually very well could have been the best move, for example, here, rook g2, bishop f6, knight f3, h4, like this is very, very sharp. I mean, you're just going here. You're 4 squares away from queening. I don't know what's happening. Magnus could have gone for this. It would have been anybody's game. Instead, he backs out of the position. And here Fedoseev in an interview said he felt like this was maybe the momentum shift because now b6, and you talk about a momentum shift. Look at 5 minutes on the clock. Magnus Carlsen makes a fatal blunder. Now the move knight c2 is winning. Why is it winning? Because you're threatening knight e3, which is literally checkmate. The king is mated, but that was obviously Magnus's plan, not to get mated, but to play gf5. But now rook g4 is winning. And if bishop f6, rook f4, the king is mated, knight e3, rook f5 wins the bishop. Bishop here, knight e3 is mate. I think this is what was missed. Magnus loses the game. Knight c2 takes rook g4, but Fedoseev doesn't see it. And now we've got an endgame that's pretty complicated, but Magnus has a minute. This is we've never seen Magnus 1 to 20, I feel like. He never, ever has this degree of a time deficit. Knight f3, Fedoseev just got to hold his nerves, and he does. He gets the rook down to the second rank, and rook c1 is a losing move. What you needed to do here is you had to start pushing somehow. It's not really understandable why to me. Like a4, then you got to get the rook to the d file, but rook c1 allows the black king to simply run this way. And Fedoseev now wins the pawn. His pawns are just faster. It's a very simple math problem. It's 2 minus 1 is 1, all right? And the pawn gets all the way down, and it doesn't matter. Black has more pawns than white. He's just simply going to win. We get all the way down to the conclusion. There are no tricks here, even if your name is Magnus. King goes to e3, king goes to d2, king goes to c1. That's it, no more checks. Here, g2. You can't stop 2 pawns. Magnus Carlsen resigns, and Vladimir Fedoseev leads Slovenia to a 3-1 win over Norway. So going into the final 2 rounds, it's India leading the Open Olympiad, dominant fashion. All right? And hopefully they are able to keep broadcasting the games and everything is good. And listen, that was such an absurd thing that happened. And on the women's, it's Kazakhstan. I mean, in the lead, but we got India, we have Team USA. We have many, 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 many good teams there. It's very close. It's going to be a crazy 2 rounds. That's all I have for you right now. Get out of here.